2025. The U.S. 10 yield at 1.8%. Gold is up 6. Shanghai was a little changed overnight. Note that the Japanese 10-year yield hit 0% for the first time since March. European markets are also under pressure, led by 1.3% losses in Germany. And back in the U.S. on the economic front at 8:30, non-farm productivity and unit labor costs. After the bell last night, Toll Brothers EPS beat the highest estimates. And regarding earnings this morning, AutoZone EPS also beat the highest estimates. Shares are up 6% in the pre-market. In other news, Jefferies said that SoftBank will probably sell part of its Alibaba stake to help pay for a buyback. And wrapping things up, CF Industries was cut to underperform at Bernstein. Church & Dwight cut to underweight at JP Morgan. Bunge was up, raised to buy over at Goldman Sachs, and Netflix downgraded over at Needham. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
Bill, thank you. To hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, Don, and Lisa.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you very much indeed. Two important events taking place in the next couple of hours down on Capitol Hill. Pleased to say that joining us now is Eric Wasson, Bloomberg News congressional reporter. Eric, great to have you with us on the program. 9 a.m. Eastern and 10 a.m. Eastern. Why are those times so important this morning?
Well, 9 a.m. we're going to find out what the articles of impeachment that Democrats are preparing against President Trump. And 10 a.m. we're going to have a press conference from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal about the USMCA deal. On that latter one, we're expecting them to announce support for the renegotiated NAFTA.
How big of a deal is that?
I think economically, the USMCA is a rather small deal, but it does give confidence to markets. It does give confidence that Trump can negotiate a China deal. So, politically, it's a very big deal for the president to finally get something through Congress. So, the politics are probably bigger than the economics, but nonetheless, it is significant.
Also, you compare and contrast what's about to happen at 9 o'clock with what's about to happen at 10. Eric, it does go to show that despite the impeachment proceedings, these two sides down in Washington can still do things together.
And I think it's not an accident at all. Nancy Pelosi has set this up, in the way the impeachment process is sort of a gift to her Democratic liberal base, and the USMCA is a favor to her moderates who are representing Trump districts, who are hearing from farmers and others they want this done. So she's looking for balance. She's looking to find the middle point of her caucus, and you see that on display very much this morning on Capitol Hill.
Eric, I got to say, I almost forgot about the USMCA. I thought maybe it's just basically a given, although a lot of people were concerned that perhaps it wouldn't get done. Does this come as a surprise in any way? I'm not seeing much action in the peso today.
Well, I don't think it's a huge surprise. There was some hiccups last week, and I think there was some peso movement yesterday, just over his last-minute issue with steel rules of origin, the auto sector. It looks like basically they've come to a compromise on that, sort of a phase-in, and Mexico was able to live with that. And we're going to see a signing ceremony today with Robert Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative, and his Mexican and Canadian counterparts down in Mexico City. They're down there now.
Eric, what do we see with impeachment? I mean, I'm going to, as an amateur, suggest it's different than Clinton, it's different than Nixon. What's next after the various processes of today and tomorrow? What is the next out there?
Well, we're going to have to see a vote on the House floor. We're looking at that probably next week, right before they go home for Christmas. And then, of course, it gets over to the Senate, where the Senate, under Senate rules, will have to immediately go into impeachment trial mode once they receive the papers from the House, and it could take anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, I'm hearing. That will bottle up other legislation, by the way, including potentially the USMCA if they don't get to that first.
Does the Senate ignore the process like the president, or do you anticipate that they'll do what Senates normally do in an impeachment process?
Oh, Mitch McConnell's made clear he can't ignore it, and I think he made that statement very early on just to sort of nip in the bud any conservative suggestion that he should stand up and stand thwart of this process. So they're going to go to a trial. The questions, though, are what does that look like? Is it calling Joe Biden in? Is it calling in a lot, Adam Schiff? Is it trying to unmask the whistleblower? There's certainly some pressure from the right and from the president's allies to do that. And there's also a thought, let's just get it done quickly and get back to business. I would suspect the latter actually prevails. There's a lot of people like Susan Collins will say, look, I'll vote to acquit the president, but I don't want to drag this into a circus where we're interrogating Biden's son.
Yeah, but I understand that. They don't want to take the younger Biden in and do it, but how can you have a trial without a trial? I don't understand that.
Well, I mean, the thing is that the impeachment trial is very unique in our system, and you could really just have one-day presentation of evidence and a vote. This is very much up to the Senate to design this. I think 2 days would be the bare minimum. But the Chief Justice will preside, but he's made clear, Rehnquist made clear during Clinton, that this is really just a figurehead position. Any contested questions, he will just give over to a majority of senators, 51, to decide that question. So, it's a political process. The other day we call it a trial, but it's not like our judicial system.
So, John, it's completely opposite of Britain. They'd stretch this thing out for 3 years.
I thought it was the other way around in the UK, that we make this shorter, Tom, that we do things faster.
I don't know.
Well, you can certainly get rid of a prime minister in a lightning flash.
You can do that in a single vote, Eric, if you want. Eric, just quickly, if you can. The Democrats say that this is not about the election, it's about the Constitution. That doesn't stop us asking what it means for the election. What does it mean for the election in 2020?
Well, I've come to see that, a year is a lifetime in politics. And I suspect that many people will have even forgotten about this impeachment. Of course, the president will probably remind them. I think it tends to be a net positive for the president by a couple of points. He's very skillful at, combat, at convincing people the Democrats are doing something wrong. And the Ukraine issue is very, very complicated. A lot of Americans don't like foreign aid. They don't understand the politics of Ukraine and Russia, and the whole, allegation here is very complicated. So I think, in the end, it may help the president a little bit, but not a lot.
Eric Watson, great to have you with us, Bloomberg News congressional reporter, ahead of two important news conferences taking place this morning at 9 a.m. Eastern and 10 a.m. Eastern, Tom. A lot of focus on Congress and Capitol Hill through the morning.
Absolutely. I am noticing, John, and this is an aside, I'm going to rip up the script right now. Lisa Martinuzzi has out, not scathing, but it is a pointed essay on the Deutsche Bank festivities today. I know we're going to talk to her in 20 minutes, but Deutsche Bank goes back to its old ways, is rather direct from Ms. Martinuzzi. John, Deutsche Bank, 6.47 euros.
We caught up with the CEO a little bit earlier. We'll bring you some of that interview later. We'll catch up with Lisa Martinuzzi in around about 25 minutes. From New York and London, you are listening to Bloomberg Surveillance. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Around 1,500 Morgan Stanley employees are losing their jobs. The bank is slashing about 2% of its global workforce. Investment banks around the world have been trimming their staff amid a drop in trading revenue and the expectation that more trading will be moving to electronic platforms. More and more college-educated workers are taking to the factory floor. The Wall Street Journal looked at federal data and found that for the first time within the next 3 years, U.S. manufacturers are on track to employ more college grads than workers with a high school education only or less, as newer jobs require more advanced skills. Futures point to a lower open on this Tuesday. U.S. investors are still awaiting word of any kind of Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China, with the December 15th tariff deadline looming. Dow futures down 107, crude oil at $58.63 a barrel. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why? This is so difficult. What is Mark? Buying Christmas presents. Who's it for? Oh, it's someone who has trouble unwinding in the evening and then getting up in the morning. Yoga retreat. Anything cheaper. How about the new Lenovo smart clock with the Google Assistant? You can set reminders, check the weather, and it's a voice-controlled alarm clock. Perfect. It's only $59.99. Save yourself 20 quid. 20 quid? Well, that's my present sorted.
Make anyone's Christmas with the Lenovo smart clock at Curry's PC World.
Ladies and gentlemen, behold the world's most fantastical, sensational number. 21 million. Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £21 million.
Euro Millions, celebrating 25 years of the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and flows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance. For our audience worldwide, we're live on Bloomberg Radio, where your economic indicators are brought to you, as always, by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Let's get you some economic data, shall we? Let's cross over to Vinny down Judice.
Okay, Jonathan, revised figures on worker productivity, worker output per hour for the third quarter. We're now looking at a 0.2% decline. The initial estimate had been 0.3%. Unit labor costs, meantime, the revision showing us a slower pace of growth, up 2.5% versus 3.6%. So again, non-farm productivity down, and unit labor costs running at a slower pace than the initial estimate third quarter. Earlier figures from the National Federation of Independent Business, small business optimism, posting the largest gain in more than a year, up to 104.7. Later today, the Fed starts its meeting. Tomorrow it wraps it up. Economists saying, look for no rate change. I'm Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio. Let's go back to New York.
Vinny, thank you. Thank you very much. As Vinny points out, busy week ahead on the economic data front. CPI coming up tomorrow, together with an FOMC rate decision. The day after that, into Thursday, you'll get US PPI. Then we round things out with a really important read on US retail sales at the back end of this week in the United States of America. So look out for all of that data still to come in the United States. Pleased to say that joining us here in New York City is David Kostin, Goldman Sachs' Chief US Equity Strategist. Good morning to you, Mr. Kostin.
Good morning.
Optimistic about the year ahead. Give us the why.
Why is the U.S. economy is continuing to grow, and that is important because the economic activity is what drives consumer spending. Consumer is 70% of the U.S. economy. That's what drives earnings, and that's what's likely to take the U.S. stock market higher in 2020.
Above average in 2020, rising profit margins that will boost EPS by 5%. Where are the rising profit margins coming from? Where are you looking for that, David?
Well, the rising profit margins really is the fact that this year they came down by almost 65 basis points. Kind of particular, but if you really want to look at what's happening, it's ultimately revenue growth. And revenue is the story. The unemployment rate now is the lowest in 50 years, continuing to fall, likely driving overall business activity. technology margins is what really distinguishes the United States equity markets from global markets. And the tech margins are now above 20%. So in some cases, you'll see them come down, but really coming down from very, very high levels compared with everywhere else in the world. I know Tom is over there in London. There's very low profit margins over there, Tom. You want to have more profit margins, come here.
Well, I will say, though, there is some concern about a bubble in a specific slice of the stock market. I'm talking about utilities and REITs and other interest rate sensitive sectors. Societe Generale said that the world's largest stocks that win from low yields are near their most expensive relative to the losers in at least 15 years. Do you think that they are set for a big sell-off come 2020?
Well, the dispersion of valuation is how you want to think about that. That's the separation, the spread between the highest valued stocks versus lowest valued stocks are at an extreme. And that is typically associated with value stocks outperforming. But economic growth in that modest level, somewhere between 0 and 3%, not a recession, nor are you having rapid expansion, so that roughly the great rate of growth you've had in the last 10 years, that suggests that growth stocks do better. So in answer to your question, you think about value versus growth. Value should do better based on some of the metrics. Growth likely to do better. And so as an investor, portfolio manager should be thinking about growth at a reasonable price, kind of GARP, the proverbial GARP strategy. And the idea behind that, an intuition, is not to own the most expensive companies, which are in fact overvalued. I would certainly concur with that view. But rather, but you need to also have some growth because value stocks are likely to trail if the economy continues to grow.
So here we go, David. Increasingly, the consensus call is value over growth, your growth over value.
Absolutely.
Increasingly, the consensus call is the rest of the world over the United States. I don't hear that from you this morning. Why not?
Because the economic activity in the U.S. is still very strong. You've had 266,000 job print again. That's obviously last month. But the idea of the U.S. economy continuing to grow at north of 2%, call it 2.5% on average. The Goldman Sachs economics forecast is certainly well above the consensus. The consensus is like 1.8% or something like 2.3. The idea of the way you make money is to have a view that's different from consensus and have consensus move towards you. Having a view in line with consensus isn't going to make you necessarily a whole lot of money. The idea is to find the opportunity where there's a gap.
What's your view on what the participation has been through 2019? The S&P 500's up around about 25%. The Wall Street Journal came out with a well-read story in the last couple of days about the amount of outflows that we've actually seen from equity-focused funds here in the United States. Who's been buying? Who's been participating?
So when we look at the major owners of the U.S. stock market, we can look at households directly, mutual funds indirectly, foreign investors, and pension funds. Those four categories own around 85% of the U.S. stock market. And so they both benefit to the extent that they are buying, even if they just own their positions. And their positions right now, they're around the 85th percentile. Coincidentally, they're own most of the market, and they are also, relative to their own historical allocations, very, very high. And that is, as a result, they've all benefited.
And some good news for U.S. equities this morning. U.S.-Chinese negotiators planning for a delay of the December tariffs. That's according to Dow Jones. So we do finally have a report. The silence over the last couple of days has been absolutely deafening. No official report, I have to say, but the Dow Jones reporting that U.S. and Chinese trade negotiators are laying the groundwork for a delay of a fresh round of tariffs set to kick in on December 15th. It's according to officials from both sides, Lisa.
And futures race losses earlier and are heading into the green ahead of the U.S. Open on the heels of that news. So spiking upward in direct response.
Up 4 points in the S&P 500. David Costin, a special thanks to you, sir. Goldman Sachs chief U.S. equity strategist on the year ahead and slightly contrarian, I must say, on some of those calls as well. Great to see you, David. In the bond market, Treasury's unchanged, 182 on a 10-year yield, up a single basis point on a 2-year now to 162. In foreign exchange, to give you a feel of things in G10, the Swissy was your outperformer on the morning. It's not anymore. It's back to sterling. Sterling stronger by 0.2%. From New York and London, you are listening to Bloomberg Surveillance. We are live on Bloomberg Radio.
Let's get the news. We have John Tucker here in New York City. John.
And Lisa, House Democrats,
poised to unveil 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, with an announcement expected this morning at 9. Bloomberg Radio will carry that live. The Justice Department's internal watchdog says the FBI was justified in opening its investigation into ties between the Trump presidential campaign and Russia and did not act with political bias. And President Trump's administration plans to sign off on adjustments today to a free trade deal with Mexico and Canada. Hong Kong police defused 2 homemade bombs at a local Catholic school. It's a reminder of the potential for escalation in the city's financial center after a lull in protest violence. And the Republican-led Senate Foreign Relations Committee considering sanctions on Turkey and Russia, both countries that President Trump has tried to court despite the reluctance of Congress. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg Tom.
And now with the news, and now with the sports, the Bloomberg NBC Sports Report. Here's John Stashauer.
Tom, Monday Night Football went to overtime in the rain in Philadelphia. The Giants owned the first half. 2 Eli Manning touchdown passes to rookie Darius Slayton, a 2-touchdown lead. And Eagles fans, who, yes, once famously booed Santa Claus, were booing the team that just 2 years ago won the Super Bowl. But Eli and the Giants did nothing on offense after halftime, only 29 yards, and the Eagles caught up. They won it 23-17 in overtime on a Carson Wentz TD pass to Zach Ertz. Those two had hooked up for the tying score with 2 minutes left. In the second half and the OT, the Eagles had 18 first downs and the Giants 2. Philly had twice the possession time. Wentz, 33 of 50, 325 yards. Eli, in his first game in nearly 3 months, 15 of 30 for just over 200 yards.
That's why you practice and play, is to go out there and compete on Sundays. So obviously would have liked to got the win. I thought we had a great first half and gave ourselves a chance. And second half offense, we just did not do hardly anything. So put our defense in a bind. They're on the field too long, and we got to find we got to score some points in the second half.
Eagles end a 3-game losing streak. They move into a tie for first. It's the second 9-game losing streak in the 94-year history of the Giants. They were 0-9 in 1976. They lost 8 straight in Philadelphia. World Series MVP Steven Strasburg staying with the Nationals. He'll make $35 million a year for the next 7 years. The Yankees had met with Strasburg. They're focused now on trying to sign Garrett Cole, who's 2 years younger, and he figures to make even more. 20th win of the year for the Islanders, 5-1 at Tampa Bay. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Tom?
John, thanks so much. Some nuance here in these headlines. The Bloomberg headline, and this is out of our China team, is China sees U.S. postponing December 15th threat as tariff cuts debated. That's different than the Dow Jones headline of a bit ago. The outcome's the same. Futures up 7, Dow futures up 25. A real nice move on the tape. Almost a big figure on the VIX, 14.98 points as well. Dollar fractionally weaker, euro 110.78, and yen 108.67 as well. We're going to continue forward with this. Brendan Murray will join us here on these important set of headlines moving to December 15th. China sees U.S. postponing December 15th threat. This is Bloomberg Radio.
I'll be here till the end of time.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
The lifeblood of tech startups isn't just money. It's executive and technical skills, the kind of skills that companies need to build real products. and the skills that venture capitalist Chris Sugden of Edison Partners sees in the graduates that are coming out of New Jersey Institute of Technology.
The amazing thing about NJIT is their graduates, they have multiple offers on average, not just one. They're coming out with real skill sets that are immediately hireable and available to them. I think we see an understanding by the faculty and administration at NJIT that we got to train and educate the whole student, not just their, one side of their brain. And I do think that's sort of part of the DNA today. There's practical and there's sort of academia, and merging those two together and understanding that if we're going to have our young people go get great jobs and have great successful careers, they've got to have both sides of their brain activated. And I think we see that with NJIT.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
So, Minister, how will your party combat the climate crisis? Is there a deadline? But is that too little too late?
Get an in-depth look at how the main parties are planning to tackle climate change. From the environmental crisis to the Brexit crisis, the Times and the Sunday Times will guide you through. Pick up your copy today or visit thetimes.co.uk.
Hey, tune-in listeners, Steve Kornacki here from NBC News. I want to tell you about a podcast I'm hosting called Article 2, Inside Impeachment. It's dedicated to bringing you the latest developments on the impeachment inquiry into President Trump. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I talk to NBC News reporters who are closest to the story to break down what's new, what matters, and what it means for the 2020 election. Search and favorite Article 2, Inside Impeachment on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, and he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. Network of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
American political history is unfolding this morning as articles of impeachment against President Trump are due shortly. According to news sources, Democrats are expected to put forward at least 2 charges, one for abuse of power, the other obstruction of Congress.
Thursday, the House Judiciary Committee could debate these articles of impeachment and potentially vote them out of the committee. That, of course, would put the House of Representatives on track to vote to impeach President Trump the week after.
There's Lauren Fox. New Zealand's Prime Minister is Jacinda Ardern.
There is no limit to New Zealand's capacity to mobilise, to respond, to care and embrace those impacted by tragedy.
Police say a person injured in that volcanic eruption has died, bringing the death toll to 6. About 30 people remain hospitalized, suffering severe burns. Authorities believe another 8 bodies remain on White Island, say it's too dangerous to recover. I'm John Brown.
So what would you do with an extra $500 a month in budget?
$500. This isn't hypothetical, by the way. This is something
we did all the research for you.
This is the grander scheme of electric vehicles.
Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly.
Where's their money going?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures erased their losses after a report that tariffs slated for December 15th will not take effect as China and the Trump administration work toward a trade deal. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 3 points. Dow futures up 26. NASDAQ futures up about 17 now. The DAX in Germany is down 0.6%. 10-year Treasury, little change. Yield 1.81%. Yield on the 2-year 1.62%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.25% or 15 cents at $58.87 a barrel, and COMEX gold is up 0.4% or $5.90 at $14.70.80 an ounce. Watching palladium, it's surging above $1,900, extending a record-breaking rally. The euro 1.1078 against the dollar, the British pound 1.3176, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thank you very much. Let's get back to that breaking news, shall we? Joining us on the phone, I'm pleased to say, is Bloomberg's Brendan Murray on the latest between the US and Chinese trade negotiations. The deadline, December 15th, for 15% tariffs on around about $160 billion of Chinese imports. What will or won't happen? What's the latest in the reporting, Brendan?
So, yeah, this is the news that a lot of investors and other observers have been waiting to hear, that the final round of tariffs, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods, will likely be postponed as both sides try to work out the remaining issues in this phase one deal. So the big question hanging over the economy, from the trade wars perspective at least, is about $130 billion worth of additional tariffs that would go into effect this Sunday. Those would affect a lot of consumer goods, so they'd strike right at the heart of a pillar of the American economy, the U.S. consumer.
Brendan, we've gotten a lot of conflicting headlines over the past few months. How significant is it that the sources on the story seems to be coming from China, with Chinese officials expecting the U.S. to delay these tariffs?
Well, it's obviously we'd be waiting to hear from the U.S. administration, but that they've been sending signals themselves. Yesterday, the Agriculture Secretary, Sonny Perdue, said he thought that the U.S. would kind of back down from that threat. And then we heard from the Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, just this morning saying December 15th doesn't really matter if we do a deal before that or not. So they're definitely the harsh rhetoric from the American side is being amplified as well. So the Chinese officials, according to the reporting that we have, are expecting that threat will be removed in a matter of days. It would seem.
Brendan, one concern for the removal of these tariffs is how are both sides going to do it with saving face, right? Particularly the U.S. side. How can President Trump say, yeah, we postponed these tariffs, but we got X in return? What's that X going to be?
Well, from Trump's perspective, that X is going to be a big multi-billion-dollar number of agricultural purchases from China's end, and it could also include things like some pledges on or pledges to protect American intellectual property, and some of these other tougher issues they might kind of hint at. But those tougher issues, we understand, are going to be pushed off to later phases of this broader trade deal.
To develop bilateral trust, Brendan, how do they monitor this?
Well, that is the big question, and one of the main sticking points for the U.S. is the enforcement of this. China has made a lot of pledges over the years on what it's going to do to make its economy more market-oriented, and pledges that many people think they haven't lived up to. So the Trump approach is to not just get the pledges, but to get the enforcement as well. So that's may explain why this is dragging on for months and months.
So we get through December 15th, and let's assume it's good. Dow futures up 6, Dow futures up 43. And then we move on. Where does enforcement or monitoring fit in the then we move on?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Tom. It's the kind of thing that the U.S. would want, China to make to make its legal system tougher, so that patents are protected. And these are very difficult issues for China to address. These are issues of sovereignty that the China doesn't want the U.S. telling it how to run its legal system. So this is where these really tough issues are hard to get at, and we're seeing that because the initial phase of this, the one we're reporting on today, these deal with kind of basic issues, and they'll kick the tougher ones down the road.
How far down the road, and does it matter?
Well, some people would say that these are never really going to get addressed, that just for the reasons I just explained, that, China's, protection of its own sovereignty on issues like intellectual property.
Sure.
So we might hear, it could take months, but in reality, big complex trade agreements take a long time, and, it's very unlikely that, phase one would be followed very quickly by a phase two or even a phase three, as we've been told might happen.
I was actually more simplistically talking about the phase one deal. I mean, if we're pushing back the December 15th tariffs, ostensibly there will be another deadline.
December 16th.
Right. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, we're kicking the can, 2 hours down the pike.
It's really, one of the games I'm just not playing anymore is predicting when things are going to happen.
Oh, come on, Brendan.
I would put it at a matter of several weeks, if a couple months. It just seems like, the second you predict something, another delay comes along. So it's impossible really to kind of pinpoint when these things are going to come together.
Brendan, you need your own radio show, and then you'll start predicting dates. Brendan Murray, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it, running all of our trade coverage. It has been more than eventful, to say the least. Lisa, I want to go over to what you're working on for your show this week on markets and on transactions as well. What's the angle you're taking this week?
Actually, it's interesting that the first quarter is going to be really active for deals from private equity firms. That's what I'm hearing. And the reason why is because people are so concerned about what happens heading into the 2020 elections and wants to front load
anything. Get it out of the way.
Yeah. And I think that it's very interesting to see how that occurs and how you're seeing an increase in interest on both the investor side as well as the issuer side, the sponsor side. And it sort of raises a question to me of, are they right? Is the market going to have turmoil later in the year? Or is this glut of supply in and of itself going to cause some sort of disruption? I think that it raises some interesting questions.
Well, the deal flow can be there, and of course fueling it is low interest rates, whether nominal, perceived, or real. And the answer is this just hasn't gone away.
Yeah, well,
it's just still here.
If you take a look at junk bond yields, they've actually fallen to the lowest in more than 2 years as of last night. 5.39% to own junk bonds. And of course, that includes the bifurcation where you see the top-rated junk bonds yielding what a top-rated investment grade bond once did. And it just raises a question of how much longer, how much lower. And it's something that a lot of people are really wondering heading into 2020.
No, it'll be interesting to see. And of course, again, I want to summarize here in the time we've got left, the energy space, because one of the things, folks, I got wrong this year. I thought we covered all the energy debacle like 4, 5, 6 years ago. Lisa, I was just flat out wrong on that, right?
As was pretty much everyone else, Tom. So you have a lot of good company. No, not everyone else, but a lot of people thought that was the shakeout, right? And yet we've seen this persistent underperformance of energy credit, and we've seen an ongoing consolidation. And whoever you speak to, they say it's going to continue. That it has to. It's not profitable right now in the shale patch with crude where it is.
Yeah, and this is, folks, with crude elevated, $59 on West Texas. Brent crude is a solid $64 a barrel this morning. I know they need a higher price, Lisa, but it's not that bad. I mean, we've had a lot lower prices this year.
All right, Tom, I want to talk about something more serious. And that's your experience watching the Arsenals. I want to learn from you. I know that I poo-poo your discussion with John all the time.
The Arsenals. I love that. No, it's
look, you can school me. I mean, it's like one person who learned.
To Bloomberg 106.1 FM Boston and 99.1 FM Washington. It's real simple. There's nothing better than two people who don't know what they're talking about. So let's go there.
No.
The thing with Arsenal, first of all, is so many people in the Bloomberg world live, breathe, die arsenal. It's got a huge London following, including Kit Jukes, who joined us today. That's really why we were bringing it up. And early in the season, even a hack like me, Lisa, could see that they were fun and they had a pulse of decent offensive players, and then it just evaporated.
But can I ask you, do they do that thing where they fall down in this really dramatic way?
You're dead on.
I mean, to me, have you noticed that the men's soccer teams, they all do that, right? They all fall down and make a big deal of it. The women's soccer teams never do. I will just put that out there.
You're 100% right on that, but I would defer to Coach Farrow, who's made clear it's cultural. And the answer is they've really tried to stop it in English Premier League football. It's not like in the NHL. In the NHL, if you fake a fall, you go right to the penalty box.
Yeah, I mean,
and I've seen it on superstars.
Well, it also is sort of it undermines the sense of strength and power. I mean, it's not something that you want to do. Yeah, I didn't want to go there, but I mean, I have noticed though that women also. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. How's Vet Bill enjoying London?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and your question's good because I think it's held the American interest in soccer back by all the pretend falling in that, but there's less of it, and certainly in English football as well. There are important hearings here at the 9 o'clock hour. The impeachment of the President of the United States. We'll have full coverage. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg market.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
From ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
How will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 podcasts, season 6. Listen in favorite 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
Some days life can get in the way of catching up on the news that moves your world. TuneIn is here to help. With live 24/7 coverage from CNN wherever you go on the TuneIn app, you can always find a slice of your schedule, however long, to check in on the biggest stories of the day.
Hell hath no fury. The president's counselor went on a rampage on a taped phone call with Washington Examiner reporter.
Search CNN on TuneIn to get the live news when it matters most.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
The good news is the economy is strong. The bad news is the economy is strong.
Financial crises take a really long time to recover from.
Finance.
The strong job market's pulling people back in.
You can't have for very long, monetary union without a fiscal union.
Investment.
What we preach is extreme diversification.
It's hard to have sustained productivity without capital investment.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
From our world headquarters in New York, our studios in London at Queen Victoria Street, the election of the United Kingdom coverage all this week with that important election Thursday, with results coming in 10 p.m. Thursday night London time, about 5 p.m. U.S. Wall Street time as well. Much other news, of course, on central banking. Lagarde, we just got the headlines out of a possible delay in the December 15th tariff agreement. Futures jumping on that from -12, now +3. A little bit of a nuance there. And then, Paul Sweeney, there is impeachment. I'm Tom Keene in London, Paul Sweeney in New York. And Paul, I guess it's some form of announcement by the House of Representatives.
Yeah, very much, Tom. And also a headline crossing now from citing Mexico. All 3 countries have agreed to sign
the USMCA today. So that is a lot of news crossing the tape, Tom. We have the impeachment press conference coming up just moments right now. Right now, let's go to Dave Wilson, see what's going on in the market. We have futures, we have green on the screen. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you seeing out there?
Well, not everything is green, I can tell you that much, Paul. One stock that's in the red, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, down 3.5% in early trading. Francis Sanofi said it may sell a 22% stake in the drug maker after a lockup period expires at the end of next year. Regeneron and Sanofi are also overhauling their collaboration on several drugs. Netflix is down 2%. The video streaming company stands to lose 4 million U.S. customers next year unless it adds a lower-priced service to fend off competition. That's according to Needham, which cut its Netflix rating to the equivalent of sell from hold. Norton LifeLock, the old Symantec, up 3%. The computer security company may combine with the consumer business of McAfee, according to the Wall Street Journal. The report cited people familiar with the matter and said some private equity firms are also interested in a deal. Agilent Technologies up 2.5%. Activist investor Bill Ackman's hedge fund disclosed about a 1% stake in the life sciences equipment maker. Ackman's Pershing Square Capital bought the shares during the third quarter. A couple of analyst calls lifting stocks. One of them at State Street up 2.5%. The Trust Bank was raised the equivalent of buy from hold at Keefe, Bruyette and Woods. And Parker Hannifin up 2%. The industrial product maker was raised to buy from sell at Goldman Sachs. The firm lifted its 12-month share price estimate by 28% to $230, and that's the highest projection among 18 analysts in the Bloomberg survey. Some stocks moving after earnings. AutoZone up 5.5%. The auto parts retailer's profit for the fiscal first quarter beat analysts' highest estimate in the Bloomberg survey. Sales also top projections. MongoDB, they're in the business of data analysis software, up 8.5%. Company had a narrower loss and higher revenue for the fiscal third quarter than analysts expected. Similar story at Vail Resorts, the ski resort owner, and that stock's up 2%. And Stitch Fix.
Wait. We're going to go right past the skiing?
Right past the skiing.
Ski right past it?
We're going to go right on.
There's
to
good
Stitch
snow
Fix.
out west. It's going to be a good year.
Yeah, okay, fine. Stitch Fix is up 9%. The apparel subscription company broke even for the fiscal first quarter rather than having a loss as analysts expected. Revenue also beat projections. And one more for you, Genworth Financial up 10.5%. The insurer received Canadian regulatory clearance to sell a local mortgage insurance unit to Brookfield Business Partners for $1.8 billion. That deal is designed to gain approval for a takeover of Genworth by China Oceanside Holdings.
David, can I point out that MTN, Mountain, Vail Resorts, much maligned, is up 22.7% per year in the last 10 years? Paul Sweeney, is that because you and I are paying $75 or $100 lift tickets?
You know what it is, Tom? It's these mountain passes they have. First of all, Vail, I think, owns every major mountain in North America, it seems like. And they have this pass. I forget what the name of it is, but it's a pass that lets you ski all across all the mountains. And so all of my friends are front-loading, buying these passes, which is great cash flow to Vail Resorts. And maybe they get their money's worth in skis 7 or 8 times, whatever the break even is. Probably not. But
probably not.
Vail owns pretty much everything.
I'll just point out, Tom, those season pass sales Paul's talking about, Vail Resorts coming out and saying that sales through December 2nd were up about 17% in dollar terms from a year ago.
31% EBITDA margin at the operating income line. Net income is 14 cents. Paul, every time you buy an overpriced hot cocoa at 12,000 feet, they take 14 cents down to the bottom line.
And I'm a big fan of Vail Resorts. They put money into their properties. You see when they buy a property, they just put a lot of CapEx in there, and you can really see it on the mountain.
Well, it's Rob Katz, and I remember when they came public a million years ago, people laughed about it. This is before Rob Katz, but people laughed about it, and the answer is they have delivered in spades.
They really have. So,
is somebody that you got any more, David, or is that it?
That's it.
Okay, David Wilson,
stocks editor Dave Wilson. Thanks so much. Yeah, it's interesting. Bloomberg Market Drivers was brought to you by Audi. Defy the law of human nature with exceptional offers. on select models during the season of Audi sales event at your tri-state Audi dealer. So there we have it. Tom, we're still waiting for this press conference in Congress announcing the articles of impeachment against President Trump. People are starting to file in now, so I think it's just moments away.
Yeah. Well, we will see. And, of course, it'll be the drama. Of course, we had Speaker Pelosi speaking as leader of the Democrats 8, 9, 10 days ago. And, again, they're moving things rapidly forward here on December 10th as they try to get through to Christmas. Paul?
Okay, right now we're going to toss to Speaker Pelosi.
On this solemn day, I recall that the first order of business to members of Congress is the solemn act to take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. There's great respect and gratitude that I thank the chairs of the committees, the 6 committees who have been working to help us honor our oath of office. I also want to thank the staff of those committees and the committee members for all of their work over this period of time to help us protect and defend. I want to thank the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Nadler, chair of the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Schiff, chair of the Ways and Means Committee, Chairman Richie Neal of Massachusetts, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Elliot Engel of New York, the chair of the Financial Services Committee, Maxine Waters of California, the chair of the Committee on Government Reform and Oversight, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. I also want to acknowledge the important work that was done by our dear and departed, may rest in peace, Elijah Cummings as chair of the Oversight Committee. Now pleased to yield to the distinguished chair of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Nadler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Over the last several months, the investigative committees of the House have been engaged in an impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump's efforts to solicit foreign interference in the 2020 elections, efforts that compromised our national security and threatened the integrity of our elections. Throughout this inquiry, he has attempted to conceal the evidence from Congress and from the American people. Our president holds the ultimate public trust. When he betrays that trust and puts himself before country, he endangers the Constitution, he endangers our democracy, and he endangers our national security. The framers of the Constitution prescribed a clear remedy for presidents who so violate their oath of office. That is the power of impeachment. Today, in service to our duty to the Constitution and to our country, the House Committee on the Judiciary is introducing 2 articles of impeachment charging the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, with committing high crimes and misdemeanors. The first article is for abuse of power. It is an impeachable offense for the President to exercise the powers of his public office to obtain an improper personal benefit while ignoring or injuring the national interest. That is exactly what President Trump did when he solicited and pressured Ukraine to interfere in our 2020 presidential election, thus damaging our national security, undermining the integrity of the next election, and violating his oath to the American people. These actions, moreover, are consistent with President Trump's previous invitations of foreign interference in our 2016 presidential election. And when he was caught, when the House investigated and opened an impeachment inquiry, President Trump engaged in unprecedented, categorical, and indiscriminate defiance of the impeachment inquiry. This gives rise to the second article of impeachment for obstruction of Congress. Here, too, we see a familiar pattern in President Trump's misconduct. A president who declares himself above accountability above the American people and above Congress's power of impeachment, which is meant to protect against threats to our democratic institutions, is a president who sees himself as above the law. We must be clear. No one, not even the president, is above the law. I want to recognize the great contributions of the investigative chairs, particularly Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff, Foreign Affairs Chairman Eliot Engel, Committee on Oversight and Reform's former chairman, the late Elijah Cummings, and its new chairwoman, Carolyn Maloney, Financial Services Chairwoman Maxine Waters, and Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal, who helped lay the foundation for the articles we are introducing today. I also want to thank my Judiciary Committee colleagues who were critical in our work to hold the President accountable and in the drafting of these articles. Later this week, the Judiciary Committee will meet to consider these articles of impeachment and to make a recommendation to the full House of Representatives. We do not take this action lightly, but we have taken an oath to defend the Constitution. And unlike President Trump, we understand that our duty, first and foremost, is to protect the Constitution and to protect the interests of the American people. That is why we must take this solemn step today. Elections are the cornerstone of democracy and are foundational to the rule of law. But the integrity of our next election is at risk from a president who has already sought foreign interference in the 2016 and 2020 elections and who consistently puts himself above country. That is why we must act now. I want to turn now to Chairman Schiff, who will explain the evidence that supports these articles and the need for us to act with such urgency today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to my colleagues. Good morning. The framers of the Constitution recognized that someday a president might come to office who would abuse that office, betray the public trust, and undermine national security to secure foreign help in his reelection, and who would seek to abrogate the power of Congress to hold him accountable. They recognized this danger, and they prescribed a remedy, and that remedy is impeachment. It is an extraordinary remedy and one that I've been reluctant to recommend until the actions of President Trump gave Congress no alternative. We stand here today because the president's continuing abuse of his power has left us no choice. To do nothing would make ourselves complicit in the president's abuse of his high office, the public trust, and our national security. The president's misconduct is as simple and as terrible as this. President Trump solicited a foreign nation, Ukraine, to publicly announce investigations into his opponent and a baseless conspiracy theory promoted by Russia to help his reelection campaign. President Trump abused the power of his office by conditioning two official acts to get Ukraine to help his reelection: the release of hundreds of millions of dollars in military aid that nation desperately needed, and a White House meeting with an ally trying to fend off Russian aggression. In so doing, he undermined our national security and jeopardized the integrity of our next election. And he does so still. The evidence of the president's misconduct is overwhelming and uncontested. And how could it not be when the president's own words on July 25th, "I would like you to do us a favor, though," lay so bare his intentions, his willingness to sacrifice the national security for his own personal interests. And when the president got caught, he committed his second impeachable act: obstruction of Congress of the very ability to make sure that no one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. The evidence is every bit as strong that President Trump has obstructed Congress fully, without precedent, and without basis in law. If allowed to stand, it would decimate Congress's ability to conduct oversight of this president or any other in the future, leaving this president and those who follow to be free to be as corrupt, malfeasant, or incompetent as they would like, with no prospect of discovery or accountability. Now, some would argue, why don't you just wait? Why don't you just wait until you get these witnesses the White House refuses to produce? Why don't you just wait until you get the documents the White House refuses to turn over? And people should understand what that argument really means. It has taken us 8 months to get a lower court ruling that Don McGahn has no absolute right to defy Congress. 8 months for one court decision. If it takes us another 8 months to get a second court or maybe a Supreme Court decision, people need to understand that is not the end of the process. It comes back to us and we ask questions because he no longer has absolute immunity, and then he claims something else, that his answers are privileged and we have to go back to court for another 8 or 16 months. The argument, why don't you just wait, amounts to this. Why don't you just let him cheat in one more election? Why not let him cheat just one more time? Why not let him have foreign help just one more time? That is what that argument amounts to. The president's misconduct goes to the heart of whether we can conduct a free and fair election in 2020. It is bad enough for a candidate to invite foreign interference in our political process, but it is far more corrosive for a president to do so and to abuse his power to make it so. Despite everything we have uncovered, the president's misconduct continues to this day, unapologetically and right now. As we saw when he stood on the White House lawn and he was asked, what did you want in that July 25th call? And he said the answer was a simple one. And not just a simple one on July 25th, but a simple one today, and that is he still wants Ukraine to interfere in our election to help his campaign. Even this week, the president's lawyer was back in Ukraine seeking to revive the same debunked conspiracy theory promoted at the president's behest. Which gets to the final and most pernicious of the arguments that we have heard in the president's defense. That the president can do whatever he wants under Article 2, including get foreigners involved in our elections, and we should just, to quote the president's chief of staff, get over it. Ben Franklin said, we have a republic if we can keep it. The president and his men say, you can't keep it, and Americans should just get over it. Americans don't get to decide American elections anymore, not by themselves, not without foreign help. For the members of Congress, this is not a question of fact because the facts are not seriously contested. It is rather a question of duty. The president's oath of office appears to mean very little to him, but the articles put forward today will give us a chance to show that we will defend the Constitution and that our oath means something to us. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we're waiting for witnessing House Democrats here announcing 2 articles of impeachment, charging President Trump with abuse of power and obstructing Congress's efforts to investigate his dealings with the Ukraine. Tom, to get some color on this, we welcome Terry Haynes, founder of the Pangea Policy Advisory on impeachment. Terry, thanks so much for joining us. Compelling statements made this morning. What are your takeaways?
My takeaways first is that, and thank you for having me, is first that this is a non-event in market sense. Everybody understands that there will be a close vote in the House. The markets think that ultimately the president gets impeached in the House, but also that there's almost no chance that results in a conviction in the Senate. Something I've been saying since September, since this particular round of this all started. And so that's number one, is that it's really a market non-event. And that's particularly true when you compare it to the things that are going on with trade, where there now will be, as I wrote yesterday and was breaking this morning, apparently a delay in the December 15 tariffs. That's number one. Number two, on the political side of this, largely what this is about, and I'll just start here and then stop for a dialogue, is this is about the illusion of motion more than anything else. if there was a majority in the House to have an impeachment inquiry, to have to move forward here, generally there would have been votes on that, and there never have been. I say that not in any partisan sense, just in the sense that if you have a majority, you like to lock it down politically, no matter who you are on what issue. And so, that hasn't happened. So largely what this is about keeping up pressure on centrists that really make up the balance of power in the House, about 30 or so centrists when they have a majority of 15, wanting them to vote on it. A little bit easier for them to do that, but overall, what you're going to see here is the Democrats, particularly Pelosi and these chairs that you've heard from, talking in very high tones about the seriousness of all this. They have not convinced, and again, empirically, have not convinced any Republicans, and more importantly, I think, have not convinced the public that anything needs to be dealt with here on a bipartisan basis. And the final initial point I'll make is that I understand their need to move forward on a calendar sense, but this is singularly ill-timed in light of the Justice Department IG report yesterday detailing the many missteps the FBI and others took on Russia in the 2016 campaign. And that doesn't, on balance, doesn't help their case either. So, again, not a market event.
So Terry, just quickly here, I mean, there are two articles of impeachment here. If I'm a Republican in the Senate, is my argument simply, I don't believe you've proven these two articles here, or number two, I just don't think they're really that relevant. If I'm a Republican in the Senate, how do I not impeach?
I think that's a very good question. I think the answer is more number one than number two, but both of those tacks will be taken. Unproven, I think, will certainly be the case. And let me say parenthetically that only the first article, abuse of power, is something that has any weight here. The idea that there's obstruction of Congress, I think, frankly is laughable. And I say that because a lot of Chairman Schiff's complaints that you just heard had a lot more to do with lamenting the relatively slow speed that courts work with, and not detailing any real attempts to get information from the president or the president's people than anything else. So that kind of gets kicked out as not serious in the Senate, where they get the wrangling between the executive and the legislative. The abuse of power, though, I think comes out as not proven, but they'll also attempt to place it in context. They'll also end up saying things like, are you serious? You think this is, and I quote, fully without precedent in the history of the United States. Like no president, Democratic or Republican, ever put pressure on a foreign government to do these things. And, and the Biden thing is out there and very much again, part of all this. So that gets raised too.
Okay, Terry, thanks very much. We appreciate you hopping on here. Give us some context here. Terry Haynes, founder, Pangea Policy Advisory on Impeachment, giving us his thoughts on the announcement this morning that House Democrats announcing two articles of impeachment charging President Trump with abuse of power and obstructing Congress's efforts to investigate his dealings with the Ukraine. We'll have more of that coming up. Just looking at futures here, 6 minutes before the opening, just slightly green on the screen, not much going on here, but we'll have more on all of this coming up. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Stock futures turn higher with new reports on international trade. Bloomberg has learned that Chinese officials expect the U.S. will delay a threatened tariff increase set for Sunday. And on another trade front, Bloomberg has learned that President Trump's administration plans to sign off on adjustments to a free trade deal with Mexico and Canada today, a new so-called NAFTA, easing the path for a vote in the House as soon as next week. A top Sprint executive thought a merger with T-Mobile could lead to price hikes across the wireless industry. That's according to evidence presented by states led by New York and California suing to block the deal on antitrust grounds. trial is expected to last 2 weeks. And sentiment among small U.S. businesses is up. In fact, it climbed by the most in more than a year as more owners said profit trends are looking up and that it's a favorable time for expansion. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy.
I've got to tell you about our beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. We dropped off our Christmas shopping at the hotel. Then it was off to be spellbound at the Theatre Royal Bath. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See .com/terms.
I've always loved a kitchen experiment, especially smoothies. I've blended all sorts of mad combinations. Strawberry and charcoal, broccoli and chocolate. Not my best, that. But when I test blenders in the Witch Lab, it's not about flavour, it's about performance. Our tests use proper tough stuff, hard ice, strong veg, rough nuts. And the blenders that can hack it are the only ones we recommend for your kitchen.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow, along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney, and the opening bell brought to you by SCI. Imagine your asset management firm's operational infrastructure is a competitive advantage. Let SCI show you how at scic.com/IMS. And the S&P 500 is little change to lower at the open, down 2 points to 3133. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.1% or 28 points to 27,880. And the NASDAQ little changed at 8621. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 1.81%. 1%, yield on the 2-year 1.62%. NYMEX crude oil down 0.25% or 17 cents at 58.86 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.5% or $7.30 at 14.7230 an ounce. The euro 1.1079 against the dollar. The yen 108.59. Tom and Paul.
Oh, thanks so much. Greatly appreciated, Karen, this morning. Extraordinary right now, a little bit of red on the screen and all. And Barry Ritholtz joins us, of course, with all of his work on his acclaimed podcast and, of course, writing for Bloomberg Opinion as well. Barry, everyone is weighing in on Paul Volcker. We attempted in our own way to do it yesterday. We had some good economic talk and theory as well. With Barry Ritholtz, I want to go within your management of money, Barry, to how we were inured to 9% CDs, double-digit annuities, and the idea that the money illusion was somehow working. Those younger, Barry, don't remember the shift, what it was like back then. There was an illusion of making money, but nobody was making money, were they?
That's right. The 1970s, I was a kid, but I very much remember prices going up so dramatically, oil prices spiking, gasoline prices spiking. And if you want to understand why people are so obsessed with real returns versus nominal pre-inflation returns, the 1970s was an abject lesson in, hey, after inflation returns matter. You know, you look at the Dow in 1966, kisses 1,000. In 1982, it gets back over 1,000. So it looks like you're flat over 16 years. But the reality is you lost nearly 80% of your purchasing power over that time period. Flat for 16 years is really 3/4 of your money disappeared.
What I've always said to people, too, folks, is it's not only what Chairman Volcker did for a short period there, but in the different eras of Greenspan, Chairman Greenspan kept it going. When did we get back to normal, Barry? I don't think it was 7 or 8 or 6%, down from 10, 11, 12%. It took longer than that to get to what we perceived as some kind of normal nominal return.
Right. So put this into broader context, and this isn't me just being kind for someone's obit. I've been in the Volcker camp, for a long, long time. Not only did he break the back of inflation and kicked off a 35-year bull market in bonds, plus the 80s and 90s equity markets, but he made it very clear to the investing public and to any business person who had to think about prices 6, 12, 18 months out that we're not going to tolerate runaway inflation. We're not even going to tolerate anything more than a 2 to 4% inflation range. And let's call it a decade or two, a decade and a half, before we got back to the place where asset prices appreciated relative to profit gains. Inflation wasn't a runaway factor. Now, keep in mind, there were a lot of other things that happened at the same time. Globalization, the decline of labor unions, technology and automation. So lots of things were driving prices lower and impacting inflation. But really, he is the guy who got the genie back in the lamp and stopped inflation from becoming a giant problem in the United States.
So it's interesting, Barry. We're now sub 2% inflation. We've been that way for a while now. Do you perceive it, one of the legacies of Mr. Volcker is that central bankers around the world now have inflation very much on the front burner of their policymaking theory?
No. The entire world has completely gotten this wrong. And I'm not going too far out on the limb when I say we are not in a normal environment. What we are in is a post-credit crisis environment. When we typically get a bubble, what ends up happening is whatever we paid too much for gets auctioned off for pennies. My favorite, and this happened with railroads and happened with computers. My favorite example is optic fiber, all the high bandwidth that you have now. All the companies like Global Crossing and Metro Media Fiber that paid thousands of dollars a mile to lay this, it got sold for pennies. And that's why we have Facebook and YouTube and Netflix, all these things built on that cheap post-bubble circumstance. When you have a financial crisis, You don't end up with that. What you end up with is a hangover that causes all sorts of problems to be worked off. And that, to me, is the financial crisis of 07 to 09 is why we're still seeing rates go lower, why there's negative rates in half the world. It is very, very challenging to stop that, especially in an environment where everything keeps getting cheaper without deflation or disinflation. Technology and automation is a big driver of prices lower. That makes it very challenging for central bankers.
Inflation dead forever?
Well, I don't want to be the guy who says inflation is dead forever, and that'll be a permanently high plateau type of quote. But
it'll be on your head.
Listen, if you are thinking about refinancing your home because rates are so low and they're very attractive and there are great deals, under 4% for a mortgage, 3% if you do like a 10-1 arm, there's no rush to do it now. You probably want to do it in the next couple of years. But I wouldn't want to make a bet and say inflation is much higher 5 years from now. Hopefully it's stable. Hopefully it's 2 to 3% in 5 years. But this trend has been relentless, and it doesn't really seem that central bankers or governments around the world have been able to do anything to stop it.
Barry, how do you read a 2020 forecast?
Usually laughing out loud and mocking the author. That's the best way I do it.
Yeah, but we have to live with him. Is grinding out Bloomberg surveillance every day. This is the time of year where serious people are trying to look the crystal ball forward. I mean, they're trying to move the discussion forward. And how do you actually approach a 12-page essay by somebody you respect?
You have to start with the assumption that humans as a species are terrible at forecasting the data. Some people are better than others, but we as especially investors and economists, not very good at this. And I always send people to go read the book Super Forecaster to learn how to make better forecasts.
What are you seeing as you think about 2020?
So historically, double-digit gains in the market.
So give us your forecast.
So double-digit gains in the market historically have been followed by positive years. I've heard a number of people say the market's up too much. Hey, the most bullish thing in the world are all-time highs for stock prices. We've had, 32 new all-time highs this year? That tends to suggest a positive follow-through.
All right, so Tom needs to get out of his triple leverage.
He's been 3x leverage cash for as long as I know him. He really should have a 60-40 portfolio and be a little more reasonable.
What's that? 60% cash and 40% cash as well, right?
40% 2x.
Yeah. Very good. Barry Ritholtz, thank you so much. Serious stuff there to think about. And I really mean it with great respect for all of our guests that are writing, looking forward to 2020. It is a tough business. On the Dow, negative 100, 27,810. This is Bloomberg Radio. Good morning.
Let's get national headlines right now with John Tucker. John.
And Paul, you heard it live on Bloomberg Radio. House Democrats have released their articles of impeachment of President Trump.
The House Committee on the Judiciary is introducing 2 articles of impeachment charging the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, with committing high crimes and misdemeanors.
House Judiciary Committee Chair Gerald Nadler announcing 2 articles, one charging abuse of power for President Trump's pressure on Ukraine to investigate his domestic political rival, and obstruction of Congress for ordering the entire executive branch not to cooperate with the investigation and withholding documents. The president tweeted out earlier this morning that the impeachment process is, in his words, sheer political madness. The Republican-led Senate Foreign Relations Committee is considering sanctions on Turkey and Russia, both countries that President Trump has tried to court despite the reluctance of Congress. And Hong Kong police defused 2 homemade bombs at a local Catholic school there. It's a reminder of the potential for escalation in the city's financial center after a lull in the protest violence. Global news 24 hours a day on the air and a quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg Tom.
John Tucker, thank you so much. An incredible date calendar over the next number of days. A Fed meeting tomorrow. Look for the complete coverage. Scarlett Fu leading that coverage. Jason Kelly and Carol Masser on Bloomberg Radio as well. And then the election here in London. The election of the United Kingdom on Thursday. We move on to various Lagarde meetings. This is Bloomberg.
Startups and research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology are fueling the innovation economy. And few people are better positioned to see what's on the horizon in New Jersey than physicist and state representative Andrew Zwicker.
How technology is transforming our financial sector is revolutionary, and so much of that is in New Jersey. We are innovators when it comes to agriculture, and there is opportunity now for great transformation in how are we going to grow food in an ever-growing population, and how do we turn urban centers into agricultural centers. Autonomous vehicles is another one where we have some of the world's leading experts, and how this will transform how those who are either elderly or are visually impaired or mobilely impaired can start to use autonomous vehicles to transform their lives and have access to transportation they could have never had before.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu/research.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
This is a Bloomberg Percent.
Ah, Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10-gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Millions of people are missing out by having a current account that doesn't pay them any interest on their hard-earned money. TSB offers interest to all their Plus account customers for no monthly fee. Plus, you can stop your friends and family missing out by recommending the Plus account to them. And when they switch, you'll both earn £75. Search online or visit your local branch. Terms and conditions apply.
Heading for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hey, Tune In listeners, Steve Kornacki here from NBC News. I want to tell you about a podcast I'm hosting called Article 2, Inside Impeachment. It's dedicated to bringing you the latest developments on the impeachment inquiry into President Trump. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I talk to NBC News reporters who are closest to the story to break down what's new, what matters, and what it means for the 2020 election. Search and favorite Article 2, Inside Impeachment on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, articles of impeachment.
The House Committee on the Judiciary is introducing 2 articles of impeachment charging the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, committing high crimes and misdemeanors.
Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, takes the historic act of announcing charges against President Trump, of which there are 2.
The first article is for abuse of power.
Congress, the next charge that was read, Trump's pressure on Ukraine to announce investigations of political rivals as he withheld aid to the country. Trump tweeted today, impeaching a president with his record would be sheer political madness.
We must be clear. No one, not even the president, is above the law.
Chairman Nadler, Speaker Nancy Pelosi said ahead of the morning that President Trump remains a threat to democracy. John Trout.
Int Mortgage Corp. Call Mortgage. NMLS 128231. Housing lender. Not licensed in all states, including New York. Offer not available in Washington. 5679010 terms and restrictions.
Happy holidays from your friends at Cash Call Mortgage.
Well, you can't be the only one who spends time examining angles.
This deal, what would it look like?
You're right. The others are here.
Is he doing a good job, you think?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stocks are slipping at the open, though futures traded off overnight lows amid rising speculation the Trump administration will delay implementing new tariffs on Chinese imports this week. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is down 0.1%, down 4 points at 3131. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.2% or 51 points at 27,857. And the NASDAQ little change down 1 to 8620. 10-year Treasury down 2/30 seconds, yield 1.82%. The yield on the 2-year 1.63%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.1% or 8 cents at 58.93 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.4% or $5.50 at 14.70.50 an ounce. The euro 1.1077 against the dollar. The yen at 108.61. AutoZone is up about 7% this morning after its first quarter earnings beat analyst estimates. We're also watching Netflix down 1.3%. It was downgraded to the equivalent of sell at Needham. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thank you so much. Get negative 56 on the Dow. If you study a Matt Winkler essay, he is the founder of Bloomberg News, our former editor-in-chief. I should point out the one that gave me that fancy badge that says Bloomberg on it. If you study the methodology of Matt Winkler, it is paragraph after paragraph of density of show. And he does that on tariffs, on trade, on exports, on imports of the United States of America. And Matt, what is so extraordinary about your new essay on all the confusion of tariffs is smack dab in the middle, you go back to 1969, that was a few years ago, and say that the 5-year average of global exports has finally declined. That's the ultimate price of this trade war, isn't it?
It looks that way, Tom. You can't obviously be certain, but everything points to a deterioration of not only global trade, but particularly as it affects the U.S. and U.S. companies,
right.
Industry.
You do this, the methodology, Matt, that you use with your colleague Shin Pei is to really dive into the data and find what matters. In the density of this important essay, what was the thing that surprised you?
Well, that was without a doubt the biggest, that suddenly we're looking at the end of what has been a very long trajectory of greater trade, which has benefited the United States. And one aspect of that is if you just look at the 500 largest companies in the world, more than 50% of them are made in America. So trade has been the elixir for corporate America for more than half a century. And now we're reaching a turning point, and it's not encouraging for American business.
So, Tom, you mentioned Matt's column. I'm reading. It's probably 20 or so paragraphs. Every single paragraph has at least one number. So
that's a Winkler. That's a heritage. You haven't read the Bloomberg Way, Paul Sweeney. You've got a reading assignment this weekend.
Boy, if I'm a cub reporter, at Bloomberg News, I got my work cut out for me. But so, Matt, my simple question is globalization dead, or is this just a blip in the road in what is a global trend?
Okay, so China, by the way, continues to export, and the 5-year rolling average for China is very different from the U.S. The U.S. is leveled off. It's unchanged, whereas China is increased. That suggests that trade goes on with or without the United States, and it also suggests that relationships with trade are going to change, but that global trade will continue. It's just that the U.S. won't be the leader that it has been for much of the past 75 years.
So, Matt, I mean, we have been a leader, since the end of World War II, and I can't imagine that we're not going to be a leader going forward, despite what we're seeing right now. What's the risk to our economy if we are not, in fact, a leader?
So you're seeing that in a decline in business investment, for one thing, is that the chaos that is created by these tariffs has essentially paralyzed corporate America, and CEOs are not committing themselves to new plants and equipment in the U.S. Farmers, we don't really have to talk much about because it's obvious that they're in a perilous state because of the...
and those cash payments aren't helping?
Well, they're helping to some extent, but that's a version of crony capitalism, really. That's not what farmers want. The Trump tariffs is all about...
That's Farmer Winkler growing tomatoes out in New Jersey.
Gentleman farmer.
And bilateral deals go only so far. When you're up against, say, the EU, which is, as you know, more than 24 countries... That's not an easy negotiating position to be in, because the EU is going to be obviously multilateral, and the U.S. can't negotiate with any of those countries one by one, has to do it with all of them, and that's not going to be easy.
One final question, and this is just so important. There's an understanding Republicans and Democrats are essentially on the same page on unfree trade. Do you see in your study any window to get us back to a multilateral U.S. approach? Or are we cornered by two parties that to stay elected, given the popularity, the spirit of unfree trade, they've got to go in that direction? Or can we reverse that?
Well, if the pain is great enough, and it may be in the years ahead for American business, the politics could shift. Right now, you're absolutely right. The politics have gone 180 degrees from where they were 10 years ago.
Yeah, okay, let's leave it there. Matthew Winkler, congratulations on an exceptionally important essay. This is an essay, folks, that you read paragraph to paragraph on the dynamics of trade, and I should point out at Bloomberg Opinion, and it dovetails nicely with my chart of the year, which is the incoming custom tariffs into the United States, which shows that this is a extraordinary 6 standard deviation move, and I can't tell you how uncommon that is. In Bloomberg Opinion, Matt Winkler writing on tariffs. Paul?
Thanks, Tom. Let's get a little, it's quite a morning this morning with the impeachment. We had the announcement of the 2 articles of impeachment this morning from Democratic congressional leadership. Let's get some additional analysis. We welcome Emily Wilkins, Bloomberg government congressional reporter. Emily, thanks so much for joining us. What were your key takeaways this morning?
So the key takeaways is that they have finally announced that we are going to be seeing 2 articles of impeachment, and they will be abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Chairman Jerry Nadler of the Judiciary Committee also mentioned today that he is planning on having the committee vote on the articles of impeachment. That potentially tees us up for a vote next week to impeach President Donald Trump.
So, Emily, timing. So you think we will get an actual vote next week?
On the House floor, nothing has been officially announced yet, but there is a thought that they do want to get this done before December 20th. That's the last day of session for the year. If they do get it done, it then kicks over to the Senate for the Senate trial. And
I think we might have lost Emily, Tom.
A little technical difficulty. I thought that was the Atlantic Ocean getting in the way.
Yeah, exactly. But I think my key issue, Tom, is let's assume we get a vote. So I think we have Emily back. Emily, just following up on that. So we're going to get a vote potentially in the House next week. Give us the timing that is expected from the Senate.
Sure. So the Senate recently released their 2020 calendar, and the entire month of January is gone. They're expecting to use all of that month for this trial. It could potentially go into February as well, but it sounds like it probably will be wrapped up near sort of the first quarter of next year.
Do we know what a trial looks like? I mean, I have a recollection of the Clinton trial and that, but do you have a visual of what the quote-unquote trial would look like?
Sure. I mean, it's going to be very interesting. You're going to see all 100 senators in the Senate sitting in their desks, not saying a word. They're the jurors in this process. And so they are the ones who are listening to the arguments from either side and trying to decide whether or not they are going to vote.
Well, we got to drag you back because there's a lot to talk about here to inform the public, including myself, on really what we're in for, knowing that each impeachment is its original character. Emily, thank you so much. Emily Wilkins with Bloomberg Government this morning. Paul, when was the last time you and I talked about the media business?
I don't know. Every day that passes, you get another big mover, shaker, another streaming announcement, another deal on programming.
Extraordinary.
It's all about Frozen 2, Tom. So
I saw a $10 billion statistic. I mean, put that in perspective. I mean, remember they made the gamble on big franchises, and it's got to be the strategic business call of the last 20 years.
It really has been. I think the, Bob Iger at Disney, he kind of talked about it as intellectual property. You just have to own intellectual property. It's not a character. It's not a story. And if you own the intellectual property, which is, I think the creators don't like to hear of their work phrased that way, but if you're Bob Iger, it's an asset and you monetize it over TV, movies, and, theme park rides and so on and so forth. And, Disney does a pretty good job at that.
I'll get back from London and we'll dive into that because it is an extraordinary accomplishment. And no, folks, I've not seen Frozen 2. Maybe that beckons in London this weekend, Paul. Negative 55 in the Dow, the VIX 16.04. Please stay with us from London, from New York. This is Bloomberg.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night, and somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here, testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use, and the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Are we on the brink of a more serious downturn?
I've always thought of the municipal bond market as a little bit of a safe haven.
Banks are going to have to start paying their depositors more.
Are we still in that mode where we're buying the dips?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Cash, if you're looking at Treasury bills, provides a higher return than stocks and bonds here in the U.S.
If your consumer is a woman, you're more likely to be a growth company.
Longer-term interest rates can go down, even with short-term interest rates still going up a little bit.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Just crossing the Bloomberg terminal, the USMCA trade deal is expected to get a House vote next week. This according to key Democrats. And coming up, we're going to be hearing from Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker, as well as the House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal about that agreement, which has apparently been reached. Right now, though, let's get a check on the markets. Karen Moscow has that for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Karen.
All right, Lisa, thank you. U.S. stocks falling as investors debate whether China and the Trump administration will reach a meaningful trade deal ahead of a looming tariff deadline. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is down 0.1%, down 3 points at 3132. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down about 0.2% or 46 points at 27,862. And the NASDAQ little changed at 8621. 10-year Treasury down 730 seconds, yield 1.84%. Yield on the 2-year 1.63%. NYMEX crude oil up 0.1% up 7 cents at 59.08 a barrel, and COMEX gold up 0.33% or $4.70 at 14.6960 an ounce. The euro at 1.1079 against the dollar. The yen is at 108.62. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Lisa.
Karen, thank you so much. We appreciate that. We are awaiting a press conference with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal. USMCA, apparently a trade agreement has been reached. We'll get a vote on that apparently next week. We'll bring that to you live in just moments. But first, let's get a sense of what's going on in the market here. We're half hour into trading. Let's check in with Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what do you got?
Well, I mean, it's mostly down when you look at the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500, but not a whole lot of movement in any of them, really. It's the communication services area which kind of jumps out with a decline of 0.4%. And what's going on there? I mean, we're really starting to see the costs of these streaming services trying to establish themselves show up. I mean, you've got Comcast talking about how it's spending $2 billion or planning to in the first 2 years of its new service out of NBC Universal called Peacock. So they're going up against the likes of Netflix, and you've got a call out of Needham that, unless Netflix does something, introduces a lower price service, adds commercials, whatever, they're looking at Needham is Netflix losing 4 million U.S. customers next year, and that's where the profits are, as opposed to the international business where they've been growing. So you've got Netflix's shares down about 2% as well.
And we have Needham analyst Laura Martin coming into the studio a little bit later this morning. She'll give us her call here on Netflix.
That's exactly where I was going to go with this, because we are going to get some more insight into how much they have to really change their business model around others are doing. Meanwhile, we are seeing a bit of optimism with trade very much on the forefront. I'm wondering, though, actually now market's basically flat to a little bit lower in the S&P and Dow. What's sort of a good outcome and what's a bad outcome as we hear that the December 15th tariffs will probably get pushed back, but it's unclear for how long, and it's unclear what the terms were?
Well, that could very well be a good outcome in the eyes of investors.
So why aren't markets up more? Why aren't they up at all?
Well, because that's not the only thing going on. You've got a Fed rate decision coming.
No, hold on a second, actually, because yes, that's true. There are other things going on, but trade has been one of the dominant themes, and a lot of people have thought that the trade skirmish was the main issue holding back equity valuations from an even higher level. And I'm wondering now, it looks like we aren't going to get those December 15th tariffs. Does this just mean that was basically baked into markets as a certainty?
Pretty much. I mean, that's sort of been the consensus thinking that you get something. I mean, you saw, a bit of disturbance, you might say, in the last few days when President Trump talked about how we could take his time doing a Chinese trade deal, and it didn't have to happen right away. So you had the concern then that things were going to get put off as far as sort of derailing the new tariffs. So now we're back to sort of where people were before in terms of, where we go from here. So, that doesn't necessarily get you a whole lot of direction. And then bear in mind, you've still got an S&P 500 in the midst of all of this that is something like 1% away from a record, not even. So it just, you got to kind of keep that in mind in the context of days like this without a whole lot of direction.
Lisa always wants more. You know that.
Of course.
Higher
she wants movement and direction.
Or lower, just something interesting to talk about. I mean, when it's just sort of meandering. Although I will say there's been a huge bifurcation within markets, whether it's stocks and the value versus the staples and the sort of utilities and REITs, or if it's in credit and you see the higher rated versus the very lowest rated.
Absolutely. So it looks like we're still on the trade front. Looks like we're getting something, a deal between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, new NAFTA, if you will. I guess this has kind of also been expected by the market. It's just a question of when it was going to get announced and come to the floor.
All matter of time and all matter of a process playing itself out. And how does that sort of line up with the backdrop of what's going on in terms of the articles of impeachment that are now out there? So, you put it all together, it's just a matter of sort of juggling priorities, you could argue.
Just to sort of reiterate, we are awaiting Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker, did an announcement about the USMCA, the U.S., Mexico, and Canada agreement that is expected to pass potentially as early as within the next week or so. Dave, I'm wondering on that front, I was looking right now, the peso coming off a little bit versus the dollar. I'm wondering, will there be any market response or any surprise coming from that deal, which has been in the works for a long time? What's the significance?
Well, it's really just a matter of kind of maintaining on some level the relationships that have been in place for years. So, you might have some investors breathing a sigh of relief to the extent that you have companies that are dependent on Mexico for their, supplies or that have production plants down there. But it's not like, things have really changed all that much.
I see Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, approaching the podium down in Washington, D.C., about to make some comments, presumably about the USMCA deal, which they expect to be brought to the House floor sometimes next week. Bloomberg Stock Editor Dave Wilson, thanks so much for joining us as we're seeing a host of Congress people getting onto the stage and getting ready for this announcement from the House Speaker Pelosi.
Yeah.
Again, this is a deal that we've been waiting for some time. Let's go to Speaker Pelosi right now.
We've been working to and working for on the path to yes. We were in range for a while, but until we could cross a certain threshold of enforcement for our workers' rights, for environment, and for the prescription drug issue, as you know, they were three of the areas that we had put out there. I want to thank our chairman, Richie Neal, chair of the Ways and Means Committee, the 8 members of the task force, whom I will acknowledge momentarily by thanking them for their leadership in negotiating on different segments of the legislation. I also want to thank Richard Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO. He was persistent, dissatisfied, knowledgeable. He really got us to a place which is a far distance from where we started with the proposal that was given to us. There is no question, of course, that this trade agreement is much better than NAFTA. But in terms of our work here, it is infinitely better than what was initially proposed by the administration. And I credit our chairman, Richie Neal, for helping us navigate all of these places. The unity of our caucus on specific priorities in order to get the job done. And again, the brilliance and knowledge of Richard Trumka as to the ramifications of every provision that was in the legislation. We'll be handing out a memo from the Ways and Means Committee, you may have it, which explains why we are so proud of the distance that we have come from where we started with the administration on this legislation. It's a victory for America's workers. It's one that we take great pride in advancing. Members of the 8 members of the task force, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who has a markup in her committee about workers' rights or in appropriations, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, you'll be hearing from Mike Thompson of California, Terry Sewell of Alabama, Suzanne Bonamici of Oregon, whom you'll be hearing from, Jimmy Gomez of California you'll be hearing from as well. Where are my others? John Larson of Connecticut, Earl Blumenauer of Oregon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here we are. And now it's my honor to yield to Richie. He was indeed a maestro to make all of this happen. It's with great respect and admiration for his work and gratitude that I yield to the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Richie Neal.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Thank you. Every once in a great while, you get to participate in a "it will never happen" moment, and we are witnessing that today. The other value of technology, I will point out, was after a round of intense finishing conversations and negotiations over the weekend that started on Saturday morning with the Speaker, myself, and the Trade Rep, Robert Lighthizer. We went back and Mr. Trumpka, the Speaker, was on a hunting expedition. We spoke with him frequently. But the Speaker talked to me earnestly about we're near. And on Sunday, when Tom Brady was about to take it in, all of a sudden I looked at my phone and said Pelosi for caller ID. Long wisdom tells me, the hell with Brady, take the call.
And I was watching Baltimore and the 40.
So this is a transformative agreement. It's a template, I believe, for future agreements. Our constant emphasis was on enforceability. We fixed that. And the idea and the notion that the president of the AFL-CIO, Rich Trumpka, would be supportive of this initiative, I think, tells the story. But this is more than a triumph for organized labor. It's a triumph for workers everywhere across America. In terms of the working group members, I want to say that they strengthened the labor standards. They strengthened the environmental chapters. They enhanced the verification mechanisms for environmental trade. With the unflinching leadership of the Speaker, we also secured important changes in USMCA that preserve Congress's ability to change U.S. law to address the crisis we are facing with respect to high prescription drug prices. Over the intense period of these negotiations with the administration, I repeatedly emphasized that USMCA will deserve a vote because it's an agreement that Democrats shaped. I don't think anybody on this dais would have said 2 months ago that we would have been able to get as far as we did in this negotiation. It was based upon goodwill, but also a determination that we acknowledge the problems that have existed in the past with enforceability. And it was a very telling moment. This was shared with the media. On the day of the break in August with the working group, I said to the trade rep the last meeting, I said, nothing has fostered more disagreement about trade than the lack of enforceability. And the trade rep said to me, you are absolutely right. And he said, I want to tell you, and this is, I think I'm not speaking out of school, he said, there have been people in the State Department, the Defense Department, and the Oval Office over the years who said, don't get this one upset and don't get that one upset, because we might need them on future geographic issues. He said, our position has been that we are supportive of the thrust of what you want to do here. And I think that the initiative that we offered, his position, I think the offering that we have in front of us today is indicative of the goodwill. But some of the members on this task force, and including the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Blumenauer, what a job they did. These were intense, argumentative, angry negotiations. I mean, this got really hot on a number of occasions. I think we set a world record for hanging up on each other, myself and the trade rep. And but at the same time, we also knew that this was an opportunity that we couldn't let get away from us. And we did that. So we will continue to share more details in text. The last point is a reminder that I traveled to Mexico with a delegation to meet the president of Mexico Then right after that, I traveled to Canada to meet with the Prime Minister of Canada and the Minister for Defense and Trade, Freeland. They are, I believe, they were good partners in this. They conceded just about to every point that we asked for because of the following: enforceability, enforceability, enforceability. So with that, Madam Speaker, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, we're going to turn it back to Jan Schakowsky, a champion on the issue that related to pharmaceuticals in the trade agreement.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's been an honor to serve on the working group. The Trump administration sent us a deeply flawed trade deal that, among other things, would have raised the price of pharmaceuticals across North America by locking in high drug prices and expanding Big Pharma's monopoly. Over the past 6 months, my Democratic colleagues and I on the working group, we worked for a deal that helps America's patients, workers, and all consumers. We now have a new and improved renegotiated NAFTA that prevents Big Pharma from raising the price of prescription drugs across the United States, Mexico, and Canada. First,
we've been listening to a press conference held by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal announcing that all of the Mexico, U.S., and Canadian delegates will sign off on the USMCA today. It may then be put to the House for a vote come next week. Joining us now, Sean Donnan, I'm very pleased to say, senior trade reporter for Bloomberg News. And Sean, I'd just love your sense. What's the big takeaway from this agreement?
Well, I mean, the big takeaway is that it is a remarkable day when the Democrats will back a trade agreement negotiated by Donald Trump. But we're very quickly seeing this morning the way both sides are going to spin it. We're hearing the Democrats in this press conference that is still ongoing, talking about fixing what they saw as a deeply flawed trade agreement that was brought to them by Donald Trump. Donald Trump is out there on Twitter this morning calling this deal the best deal the U.S. has ever struck. He's clearly going to be taking that onto the campaign stump over the next year. This gives him some political right to claim a victory for his trade policy. At the same time, Democrats are going to be claiming that they fixed what was wrong with this deal, and therefore they deserve the credit. We heard Richard Neal, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, saying he and U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer set a world record for hanging up the phone on each other in what were some contentious negotiations over the past few months. But you get to the end of this and you really got to step back, and it is a remarkable bipartisan day in a Washington that is anything but. And the fact that this announcement comes just hours or just a couple of hours after we had the unveiling of articles of impeachment is it really tells you what an interesting time it is we're living in.
Just real quick here, I'm wondering, Sean, what's the biggest difference between the USMCA and NAFTA?
Well, the USMCA, first of all, is really just an update of NAFTA. In fact, throughout the negotiations, the U.S. officials were working off text that called it NAFTA 2.0. The name comes from Donald Trump. It is his rebranding, his effort to get rid of NAFTA, which he has called the worst trade deal ever. The new things in here are really some new content rules for North American autos. That is the biggest chunk of trade that is now covered by NAFTA. A lot of cars made in Mexico, of course. Those new rules will require a higher level of production here in North America, more parts to be made in North America, and importantly also that 40% of all that work out in factories will have to be done at high-wage factories, factories that pay more than $16 an hour, and the hope from the Trump administration is that will force more automakers to put factories here in the United States.
Sean Donnan, thanks so much for joining us with your quick commentary on this USMCA trade agreement. Sean Donnan, senior trade reporter for Bloomberg. I want to bring in now Robert Lawrence. Robert's a professor of international trade and investment at Harvard's Kennedy School and former economic advisor to President Clinton. Robert, thanks so much for joining us. I guess the real question a lot of investors have is this a materially different / better deal than the existing NAFTA agreement? If so, how?
Well, I would say from the standpoint of investors, the most crucial thing is we have a deal so that the conditions for, I guess, 90% of industries who engage in trade with Mexico haven't really changed. So what they've gotten now is a removal of a cloud that's been hanging over them from the standpoint of uncertainty. So I think that's the big message. NAFTA has been basically preserved. They've tinkered around at the edges. In some respects, actually, it's weaker now, particularly with respect to the protection that foreign investors get. They used to be able to have panels if the governments had mistreated them, and they could go to arbitration on those panels, and they are no longer present except, I think, in the energy sector in Mexico. But I would say, by and large, not huge changes, with the exception of a few industries, one being, as has already been mentioned, automobiles, where higher local content, higher North American content is being required.
So, Professor Lawrence, this comes on a day when a lot of people are looking toward some sort of U.S.-China agreement, and people are saying, well, this shows that the U.S. can get a deal done, that President Trump's administration can affect something with a bipartisan type of coalition. Do you think that is a fair conclusion to draw?
Well, I think it is. In the sense that, it wouldn't take a huge amount, it seems to me, if the administration were willing, but there's a lot, to go back to the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, where a lot of the Democratic opposition was based on this question of enforceability. And since the Democrats have now come up with a formula which they believe is adequate, in the case of USMCA, you could, in fact, see other agreements in prospect in Asia.
So, Professor, we listened to the press conference earlier announcing this transaction. The Democrats are clearly saying this is a win for the U.S. Do you think it's also a win for Canada and Mexico?
Absolutely, because, again, I don't think it's the very precise details of the agreement. It is the existence of agreement. Ever since Donald Trump came into office, as was noted, he called this the worst deal ever. There was the threat that we'd have no NAFTA. And I think even the opponents started to appreciate the only thing they didn't like more than NAFTA was no NAFTA. And so I think both Canada and Mexico now can have much more stable relationship, and we have a system where the rules are agreed. And that's very important for the investors, ultimately, that they want to attract, and indeed for those Canadians and Mexicans who want to invest in the United States.
Professor Lawrence, I'm struck with a lot of conflicting messages right now, because you have on one hand the USMCA, which was indeed struck. You have the expectation that the December 15th tariffs on Chinese goods are probably going to get pushed back. That's the report this morning. But then there's also this question about the U.S. putting tariffs on French wine and French cheese, and who knows if potentially automobiles would still get roped up in that. Do you think that it's fair to take a step further and even say that this shows a certain conciliatory tone out of the White House that we hadn't seen in the past, or is that a step too far?
Well, I would say it's probably a step too far. We already saw that the White House makes a big noise about some of these trade agreements, but when push came to shove, they negotiated an agreement with Korea that looked quite similar to the previous one. We're seeing that in the case of Mexico. There will be a continuation of a lot of frictions. And even if we do get delays or we cancel the tariffs that are supposed to be implemented with respect to China, we haven't really dealt with the deep and fundamental differences that we still have with China. So I don't think this heralds the dawn of the new free trade era, but it certainly is a step towards a more conciliatory system in which the picture is more mixed.
Robert Lawrence, professor of international trade and investment at Harvard's Kennedy School and former economic advisor to President Clinton. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your thoughts on all things trade. Again, USMCA, we get the announcement today that we're going to get a vote next week. That's a plus. Well, but I go to your point, and we've had some tariff news today. That seems like a positive. Yet it's just one tweet away from kind of going the other direction.
Well, and take it a step further, right? We've gotten all this positive trade news. This was what everybody was waiting for, and markets are barely up. I mean, you actually now are seeing a bit of a lift with the NASDAQ up 0.3%, but not much of a move. So people sort of pricing in that we'd get some sort of truce, but not necessarily seeing that friction that Professor Lawrence was talking about going away anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly. Dave Wilson making a point that maybe it was just kind of, priced into the market already, but nevertheless, as Professor Lawrence said, removing that uncertainty is a net positive for the markets. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Stocks edging lower ahead of some possible market-moving events in the next few days. That's a Federal Reserve policy decision tomorrow. The biggest focus arguably remains on whether the U.S. and China can avoid a new round of tariffs this weekend. Morgan Stanley is said to be eliminating about 1,500 jobs in a year-end efficiency push. The cuts mainly affect technology and operations divisions. A court filing sheds new light on the painkiller OxyContin and its maker Purdue Pharma. The drug maker's files show it knew that cutting its sales force wouldn't kill OxyContin sales. Purdue has been accused of creating the opioid addiction epidemic. The filing was part of Purdue's bankruptcy case. And Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson could be in for a big payday 3 years from now. The company's board granted Johnson a special award that could pay him as much as $50 million in cash. He'll collect if Starbucks stock return for 3 years exceeds at least 80% of S&P 500 companies. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. The market's in focus.
When Harlequins take on Leicester Tigers, it's always a big game. But this year, it's the big game. Hosted at Twickenham, you can expect fireworks on the field and off it. Pre-kick-off, enjoy music, entertainment and a truly incredible atmosphere. Then watch two Gallagher Premiership rugby giants go head-to-head. Tickets from just £17 children, £27 adults. Go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12. Kick-off 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December, Twickenham Stadium.
The swagger of a perfect dunk. The rush of a three made from all the way downtown. The adrenaline surge of great defense. Can you feel the goosebumps yet? There's nothing like live NBA and nothing like listening live on TuneIn.
Giannis down the lane to the rim, throw it down. Right corner three, another one.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season, so you can be there when it matters most. Never miss the action as it happens. Hear the ball you love. Hear it live on TuneIn. Search NBA today to start listening.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
From ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
How will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 podcasts, season 6. Listen now to 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
At midnight tonight, the World Trade Organization will officially be defanged. We're going to be talking about the consequences of that coming up. Plus, we're going to take a look at whether U.S. equities are still the place to be for investors heading into 2020. Right now, though, let's head to our own Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, stocks are edging just a bit higher. There's been a report that the United States and China are planning to delay a new round of tariffs set to kick off on Sunday. Meanwhile, Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. have all agreed to sign the USMCA Regional Trade Accord today. Leaders in Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. reached the agreement more than a year ago, but they've been talking about it ever since. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is now up 0.1%, up 4. Dow's up just under 0.1%, up 19. And the Nasdaq's up 0.3%, up 25. The 10-year's down 430 seconds. The yield is 1.83%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.4% at $59.25 a barrel, while COMEX